Electric vehicles are back in the news this week, in part because Elon Musk and Tesla had a much heralded battery day on Tuesday. And we're going to be talking to Akshat Rathi, who's a climate and energy reporter, a London-based reporter for Bloomberg. So welcome to the interview, Akshat.
It's good to be here.
Well, thank you. And look, this is fascinating stuff because Tesla is really pushing the envelope on battery technology and battery costs, is it not?
It is. And what we got from the high-level announcements, there was a lot of detail, but on the high-level announcements is that Tesla is aiming to cut its own battery costs by half. And the promise is within 3 years, but we should take that with a grain of salt. But they've definitely set a direction of travel.
Right, and I noticed today I was reading that the Volkswagen has introduced the ID4 SUV, which will be showing up in North America next year and looks to be in the high 30,000 range, which is, you know, they're getting competitive already. And Volkswagen claims, or has hinted, I guess, that the ID4's battery costs are below sort of the threshold of $100 a kilowatt hour.
Indeed, and it's not just Volkswagen. So Tesla is probably already at 100, or if not at 100, 120, and it will cut it by 50%. So less than $60, as they say, within 3 years. Volkswagen, as you're right, has hinted this cost that they've gone below the $100 mark. And GM has said that they are already working with LG Chem, which is a South Korean battery maker, to bring that cost down to less than $100 per kilowatt hour within years. And that is a sort of a magic number. It was the target that the US Department of Energy had set a decade ago when battery costs were about $1,000 per kilowatt hour. And they had said, they hadn't put a timeline on it, but the goal was as soon as you get to $100 per kilowatt hour, you make the lifetime cost of an electric car be equivalent to the lifetime cost of an internal combustion engine. And at that time, that's the sort of point in the adoption curve, as the technologists call it, where you go from a plateau to this steep rise. And that is probably a moment we have come to.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I use the S curve quite often in my columns. And one of the points that needs to be made is that everybody knows, is familiar with early adopters, but there's actually a group before them, the innovators. They're about 2% of the market. The early adopters are next. They're about 2.5% of the market. And once you get beyond those, now you're getting close to the inflection point where you get that rapid hockey stick growth, and we're right there. And that means the 2020s are very likely to be a hugely disruptive decade for both the automotive industry and for the oil industry.
Yeah, and we are starting to see that, especially here in Europe, that the oil industry is reckoning with that change coming, because you're seeing all these oil companies come out with net zero emissions plans, which will require them to cut their oil and gas production. And the first hint of that came in August when BP said that to be able to reach its goal, it's going to cut its oil and gas production by 40% within the next decade.
Yes, and yesterday we had the announcement from Gavin Newsom, who's the governor of California, that as of 2035, no more gasoline-powered or diesel-powered vehicles will be sold in California. But I gather that in the UK, Boris Johnson has already brought that in and is thinking about bumping it up to, or back, I guess, to 2030.
Yes, the initial ban was about 2040 on the sale of petrol and diesel vehicles. Earlier in February, they brought that date to 2035. And there has been lobbying from environmental groups, but interestingly, also from BP, to bring that date to 2030.
And it looks like is other positive signals, warm and fuzzy signals coming out of number 10 Downing Street?
There are reasons to believe that it will act. I mean, there are more reasons, not just on its own climate goals. So UK has a climate goal to reach net zero emissions by 2050, and it is doing well, but it's not on track for the next 5-year plan, the next 5-year target. So that's one reason. But another reason is the UK, was supposed to host the annual climate conference this year, which has of course been postponed because of the pandemic, and it has a pressure to at least show commitment to be more ambitious on climate and be on track to really meet its goals that it set last year.
Well, Akshat, thank you very much for doing this. What's going on in Europe is very often ignored or misinterpreted here in Canada. And I think it's really important for Canadians to understand where the leaders in climate policy and new energy technology, including electric vehicles and batteries, where those leaders are going. And your insights into what's happening in Europe is very helpful.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and thanks for having me.